Japanese games never fail to disturb us. In the previous part of this series, we already saw some of the darkest Japanese games. Today, we will continue and see more games. From a Pokémon game that hides many dark secrets from children to another game that literally made a bloody parody of politicians. Pokémon Red and Green. Pokémon Red and Green are not horror games. They are the original 1996 Game Boy titles, developed by Game Freak and created by Satoshi Tajiri, that started the entire Pokémon franchise as we know it today. But ever since the late 2000s, the internet has built an entire mythology of unsettling fan theories and urban legends around these two games specifically. Before we get into them, let's look at the plot for those who never played any Pokémon games. The story is set in the Kanto region, where players take the role of our 11-year-old protagonist named Red, who starts his journey from Pallet Town. A professor named Professor Oak gives you your first Pokémon. You can choose between Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle. All are different types of Pokémons. You also have a rival named Blue, who is happened to be the grandson of Professor Oak. From this point, your goal is simple. Travel across the whole Kanto and catch as many Pokémons you can, then train and evolve them and use them to battle against Pokémon gym leaders. After defeating all 8 gym leaders, you gain the access to Pokémon League, where you fight the Elite Four and the champion at the Indigo Plateau to become the official Pokémon champion yourself. Alongside this main journey, there is also a recurring villain group called Team Rocket, a criminal organization that steals and abuses Pokémon for profit, led by a man named Giovanni. On the surface, this is a bright and friendly adventure clearly made for children, which is exactly why the contrast with what we are about to discuss feels so unsettling. The most famous creepypasta of this game is the Lavender Town Syndrome. Around 2010, a creepypasta starts spreading that, in 1990s, many children died by suicide as a result of the music in the game. The music can only be heard in Lavender Town of the game. It is in small gloomy town in the game centered around a graveyard for dead Pokemon. Internet legends said it contained hidden high-pitched frequencies that only young children could actually hear. These frequencies supposedly caused severe headache, insomnia, and eventually drove these kids to take their own lives. But luckily, this creepypasta is fake. It's just a myth, but the next theory is very much true to the plot. There's a backstory behind a Pokemon called Cubone. In the game, Cubone wears a skull on its head, and its official Pokédex description states this skull belonged to its own dead mother. In Lavender Town specifically, there is a wild Marowak. It's the evolved form of Cubone, whose spirit haunts the Pokémon Tower after being murdered by the criminal organization Team Rocket while searching for her own missing baby. One of the most talked about technical mysteries is Missing No, short for missing number. This is actually a real glitch and not a creepypasta. It lets players encounter a broken and corrupted-looking creature by performing a specific sequence involving an old man in Viridian City. Catching it can sometimes corrupt your entire save file. But what makes it genuinely creepy is the location it appears in. Cinnabar Island is home to the abandoned Pokemon Mansion. It's the exact secret laboratory where scientists experimented on a Pokemon called Mew in order to artificially create the powerful clone named Mewtwo. Fans have long pointed out that the very same area is also crawling with another Pokemon called Ditto, which shares Mew's exact color palette and is one of only 2 Pokemon in the entire game that can learn the move called Transform. The popular theory is that Ditto is not just a coincidence, but is actually the result of an earlier failed attempt at cloning Mew, long before the scientists finally succeeded in creating Mewtwo. The idea that an entire derelict mansion full of genetic experimentation, failed clones, and corrupted broken glitch creatures is just sitting there, fully explorable, in what is otherwise a friendly kids game about catching cute monsters, is exactly why these games still creep people out decades later. None of these theories are meant to be taken as scary the way a true horror game is. What makes this entry disturbing is the contrast. A wholesome, colorful childhood classic that the moment you actually look closely at its graveyards, its missing Pokemon, and its abandoned science labs reveals just how much quiet darkness was hiding in plain sight the entire time. Fatal Frame, Mask of the Lunar Eclipse. Fatal Frame, also known in Japan as Zero and in Europe as Project Zero, is a long-running Japanese survival horror series where instead of a gun, your only weapon against ghosts is a camera. Mask of the Lunar Eclipse is the 4th main game in the series. It was released in 2008 only for the Nintendo Wii and only in Japan. It was co-developed by Tecmo, Nintendo, and Grasshopper Manufacture, the studio led by Goichi Suda. It got an official worldwide remaster in 2023 for PlayStation, Xbox, Xbox, Switch, and PC. Out of the entire mainline series, this one is considered by many fans to be the darkest and saddest of them all. The game is set on a fictional island called Rogetsu Isle. The main building here is called Rogetsu Hall. It's an strange hotel-like structure that blends Japanese and Western Meiji-era architecture. Once every 10 years, the island holds a ritual called the Rogetsu Kagura. It's a dance performed under a lunar eclipse, and it meant to let the living and the dead communicate. In 1970, 5 young girls named Ruka, Misaki, Madoka, Tomoe, and Marie had mysteriously disappeared during a festival. They were rescued from the Moonlight Grotto caverns beneath the island sanatorium by Detective Choshiro Kirishima, but all of them lost their memories. 10 years later, Tomoe and Marie died mysteriously on the mainland. They were found frozen with their hands over their crying faces. The remaining survivors travel back to the island, and the player pieces together the truth through 4 different perspectives of Ruka, Misaki, Choshiro, and Madoka. As you dig deeper, you learn the real horror behind that ritual. The island suffered from moonlight syndrome. It's a unique neurological disease that slowly erases a person's memories, identity, and face. Years before the main story, the director of the local sanatorium named Shigeru Haibara had lost his wife to this exact disease. She chose to end her life by jumping from the rooftop rather than live without her memories. Desperate to find a cure, Shigeru and his son named Yo decided to revive an ancient, forbidden version of the ritual called the Rite of Descent. This ritual required a vessel, meaning a maiden who wears a sacred mask to channel and cleanse the spirits of the dead, and also needed 5 spiritually sensitive young girls called organs to stabilize the connection with music. Shigeru chose his own daughter named Sakuya to be the vessel. Sakuya had already served as a dancer in a public festival 10 years prior, which had triggered a severe comatose case of moonlight syndrome in her. Believing this forbidden underground rite was the only way to awaken and cure her, Shigeru had Yo kidnap 5 young patients from the sanatorium named Ruka, Misaki, Madoka, Tomoe, and Marie to serve as her musical organs. Yes, they were kidnapped specifically for this secret ceremony. The new mask used for the ritual is called the Mask of the Lunar Eclipse. It was specially crafted by a master artisan named Soya Yomotsuki, who was later revealed to be Ruka's own father. He was obsessed with achieving artistic and spiritual perfection. That is why Soya had actually been testing prototype masks on his own daughter, meaning on Ruka. This twisted experimentation directly triggered and worsened Ruka's own severe case of moonlight syndrome. During the actual ceremony deep underground, Sakuya danced wearing the completed mask, while the 5 kidnapped girls played the sacred melody around her. But the ritual went catastrophically wrong. Instead of stabilizing Sakuya, the cursed mask completely fused to her face, drawing in an overwhelming, uncontrollable amount of malicious spiritual energy. Sakuya's face instantly blossomed, turning into a distorted and blurred void. The moment this occurred, a devastating wave of spiritual resonance tore through the entire island. Above ground, the performers and tourists at the public festival didn't suffer heart attacks. Instead, their faces instantly blossomed as well, and they collapsed dead on the spot from the sheer psychic shock. Below ground, Sakuya fell into a deep, death-like coma, and the 5 girls collapsed, losing every memory of what just happened to them. 2 years later, while Ruka, Misaki, and Madoka have already left the island, Sakuya wakes up, and the moment anyone looks directly at her blossomed face, they die. This spreads through the entire island like an infection, killing everyone, including Ruka's own father Soya. The island becomes a graveyard, and that is the haunted Rogetsu Isle that the characters return to years later. Misaki herself is pulled back by the spirit of a doll that Sakuya once gave her, the same doll that, unknown to her, has been holding onto fragments of both girls' memories and souls this entire time. To finally end the haunting, the ritual must be completed properly. Ruka collects all the broken fragments of the original mask and reforms it. In the game's climax, she confronts Sakuya at the top of the island's lighthouse, and instead of fighting her, she calms her down using the sacred melody called Tsukimori, the very same song the ritual always needed but never had. Detective Choshiro then places the completed mask onto Sakuya, and finally finishing the Rite of Descent a decade late. This allows every trapped spirit on the island, including Sakuya, Choshiro himself, who we learn had actually died on the island years earlier, and Ruka's father, to finally pass on. Depending on the difficulty you play on, Misaki's own fate is either left completely unknown, or she is saved at the last moment and gets to leave the island for good. The game is also filled with smaller and equally tragic side stories. One of the most disturbing belongs to a girl named Kaguri Sendo. She is a patient at the same infirmary called Rogetsu Hall, who became dangerously obsessed with her twin sister Kaworu. Kaguri crippled her own sister, just so Kaworu would always need her and never be able to leave her side. After Karo eventually suicide to escape that controlling relationship, Kaguri built a life-size doll in her image and pushed it around the island in a wheelchair, treating it as if it were really alive. Her ghost still wanders there with with that doll today, except now, the doll has actually come alive. This one is really scary. That's why I fear dolls. What makes Mask of the Lunar Eclipse disturbing is not jump scares. It is the slow horror of memory itself. Imagine a father experimenting on his own child, a brother forced to kidnap innocent girls to save his sister, and a disease where the cure and the curse are the exact same ritual. The idea of a face so consumed by grief and sickness that simply looking at it kills you is one of the most haunting concepts the series has ever used. Yume Nikki. Yume Nikki, which means Dream Diary in Japanese, is a completely free indie game released in June 2004, made using RPG Maker by a single, mysterious Japanese developer who only ever went by the name Kikiyama. To this day, almost nothing is known about who actually made it. There is no dialogue in this game. No characters speak a single word. There is barely any explanation for anything you see. And yet, it became one of the most influential and disturbing indie games to ever come out of Japan. You play as Madatsuki, who is a young girl who appears to be a hikikomori, meaning she never leaves her apartment. In her tiny room, there is a bed, a TV, a desk where she can write in her diary, and a balcony door. That is the entire real world of the game. Whenever you make her sleep, she enters a dream world, and that dream world is enormous, surreal, and deeply unsettling. At the center of the dream world is a place called the Nexus. It's a hub with 12 doors leading to different dream regions. From there, you can wander into places like the FC world, a blocky, retro-looking dimension, styled after old Famicom games, the Snow World, the Number World, a desolate mall, the Underground World, a flooded sewer, and the Guillotine World, just to name a few. None of these places explain themselves. You simply walk through them and witness whatever strange or horrifying thing is there. The dream world is filled with creatures called the Torningen. They are bird-headed humanoid figures who normally just wander around harmlessly, but if you provoke them, they turn lunatic, grow red eyes, and start chasing you. If one catches you, you get trapped in a small looping room until you wake yourself up. There is also Face, and one of the most famous horror moments in indie gaming, called Uboa. Uboa is a rare and almost hidden event. If you turn off the lights inside a character named Panako's house, you get only a 1 in 64 chance that something goes wrong. The screen flashes and the entire house twists and reforms, and Panako is replaced by a silent, motionless black creature with a cracked white mask for a face, just standing there in total silence. If you interact with it, you get pulled into a separate looping nightmare world with disturbing ambient noise, and the only way out is to either pinch yourself awake or use a specific effect to teleport away. The actual goal of Yume Nikki is to collect 24 special items, called effects, that are scattered throughout the dream world. Each effect changes the way Madatsuki looks, and many of them give her new abilities to access hidden areas. So let's go through what these actually are, because they matter a lot to understanding this game. There is the knife, which lets her stab and kill the strange dream people, making most NPCs run away from her in fear. There is the metamod, or you can say eye palm, which turns her head into a giant hand with an eye on its palm, letting her instantly teleport back to the Nexus. There is the fat effect, which makes her balloon in size, and the midget effect, which shrinks her down small enough to clone herself into up to 7 tiny copies that walk beside her. There is a flute she can play random little tunes on, a neon effect that makes the whole screen flash through different colors, and the deeply unsettling Naparabu, or you can say faceless ghost effect, where her head literally jumps off her shoulders and spins in place. There is the severed head effect from the Guillotine World, which turns her into nothing but a crawling head that can no longer wake herself up by pinching her arm, since she no longer has arms. There is a towel she can wrap around herself, a cat effect that gives her ears, a tail, and glowing red eyes, and a lamp effect that turns her head into a literal light bulb she can switch on to light up dark areas. There is the bicycle. It can be found lying on the ground in the graffiti-covered world. There are 3 different hairstyle effects: long hair, blonde hair, and the infamous poop hair, where her hairstyle is shaped exactly like what it sounds like. There is the triangle kerchief. It's a ghostly headband that lets her become invisible and pass through enemies undetected. There is the witch effect, letting her fly on a broomstick, and the demon effect that turns her skin red and gives her horns. There is the strange buyo buyo effect, which just makes her wobble like jelly when she walks. Also, the stoplight effect, which turns her into an actual traffic light that can freeze every nearby character in place. Then the frog effect for hopping across water faster, the umbrella, which makes it rain wherever she goes, the hat and scarf, which turns her into a snowman in snowy areas, and finally the Yuki Onna, or snow woman effect, where she physically transforms into a snow spirit and brings snowfall with her wherever she stands. That is all the 24 effects. None of them are explained. You just find them scattered in the hands of silent monsters across an endless and illogical dream. Once you have collected every single one, then you return to the Nexus and drop them all one by one, turning each into a small egg left behind in that room. After that, you wake Madatsuki up one last time, and for the first time in the entire game, something has changed in the real world. A set of stairs has appeared on her balcony that was never there before. before. If you climb them and press the action button, Marutsuki climbs over the railing and jumps, meaning she commits suicide. The screen fades to black, and a heavy thud breaks the silence. After that, a pool of blood appears on the ground below, and two jellyfish from her dream world slowly drift in from either side to surround it as the credits roll. Many players interpret the entire dream world as Marutsuki's mind grappling with the concept of death. By the end of the game, her suicide represents letting go and finding peace, or accepting a fate she had been running from. This is purely a fictional video game's narrative design, something the small fanbase around this game has spent 2 decades analyzing and theorizing about, mostly focused on themes like isolation, loneliness, and what it means to retreat completely into your own imagination. Yume Nikki disturbs people not because of gore or jump scares, but because of how genuinely lonely it feels. It is just you, a silent girl, and an entire universe of monsters that do not care whether you exist or not. Baroque. Baroque is a Japanese roguelike RPG made by Sting Entertainment, originally released in 1998 for the Sega Saturn and later ported to PlayStation. It eventually got a full remake for PlayStation 2 and Wii in 2007, which finally reached the West in 2008 through Atlas. This is one of those games that very few Western players have actually touched, but the ones who have, they never forget it. The world of Baroque was destroyed by a catastrophic event called the Blaze, which happened on May 14, 2032. After this disaster, the world exists in a permanently twisted and in decaying state. The only survivors are people who cling onto something called a Baroque. It's basically a personal delusion or distortion in their mind that gives them a reason to keep living through the nightmare. Some of these distorted survivors have physically transformed into monstrous creatures called meta-beings, twisted by their own guilt and trauma into something barely human anymore. You play as a nameless, completely mute, and amnesiac young man who wakes up in this ruined world carrying an unbearable and unexplained guilt that he cannot remember the cause of. A mysterious figure called the Archangel hands him a massive weapon known as the Angelic Rifle and tells him his task is simple: descend to the very bottom of a massive underground structure called the Neuro Tower and purify the being known as the Absolute God, who is somehow responsible for the broken state of the world. Here is what makes the gameplay itself genuinely disturbing in design. Death is not a punishment in this game, it is a requirement. I am not joking. The Neuro Tower's floors are randomly generated every single time you enter, and you will die constantly. And when you do, you lose all your items and your levels and get sent right back to the start. But every single death also unlocks more cutscenes, more story, and reveals more of the plot. The game is structured so that you are only allowed to understand what is actually happening to you by failing again and again. As you dig through these floors, you slowly uncover the real story. Before the apocalypse, a religious order called the Malkuth Order discovered the Absolute God and built the Neuro Tower to research it. A heretical group within the order, called the Corial faction, attempted a ritual called a Debar fusion to merge a human with God. To achieve this, they sacrificed the protagonist's older brother, but ultimately chose the protagonist himself to be the one to fuse with God. When the Archangel learned of this plan, he forcefully interrupted the fusion to seize God's power for his own goals, unintentionally triggering the blaze. This interrupted ritual left the protagonist mute, but granted him a rare and powerful purification ability. Because the Neuro Tower is lethal, the Archangel did not just wait for the protagonist, he cloned him repeatedly. Every time you die and wake up outside, you are actually a newly awakened clone inheriting the original's guilt and genetic power. Throughout the tower, you encounter some of the most disturbing character designs in Japanese gaming. There is the Coffin Man, the Horned Girl, a character called Longneck, and grotesque and twisted beings called the Littles. Survival itself in this game is deeply uncomfortable, since the only way to heal yourself is by eating the meat and hearts of the very monsters you kill, only to slowly learn that these monsters were never simple enemies. They are humans who were physically deformed by their own personal delusions and trauma. In the end, after descending deep enough, the protagonist refuses to use the Angelic Rifle. Instead, he fuses together with the Absolute God, along with Alice and Eliza, who are actually the split and fractured halves of God's own consciousness, and the Littles. But here is the twist: when given the choice, they decide not to purify the distorted world back to its flawless, pre-apocalypse state. Instead, they choose to accept the distortion completely and merging with it, and finding a strange, fragile kind of freedom inside that acceptance. The world remains broken and twisted, exactly as decayed as it always was, but the ending carries a quiet, almost hopeful tone anyway, as if to say that healing does not always mean returning to how things were before. Baroque disturbs people on 2 different levels at once. The story itself deals with grief, sin, guilt, and a religious system built entirely on suffering, but the gameplay loop reinforces that same feeling mechanically, forcing you to die, lose everything, and try again, over and over, exactly like someone trapped in their own personal cycle of trauma that they cannot escape no matter how hard they fight. Hong Kong 97. Hong Kong 97 was released in 1995 for the Super Famicom, but it was never an official and licensed Nintendo product. It was an unlicensed, bootleg game made by a single Japanese man named Yoshihisa Kurosawa, who went by the alias Kowloon Kurosawa and was distributed through a company called Happysoft. It sold only around 30 physical copies in its entire original release. It was distributed through underground floppy disk backup devices rather than real cartridges. In a 2018 interview, Kurosawa finally admitted what most people had already guessed. The entire game was deliberately made to be the worst game possible, as a mockery and a middle finger directed at the gaming industry, and at Nintendo specifically. The story, such as it is, takes place during the real historical handover of Hong Kong from British to Chinese rule in 1997. The opening narration describes a wave of immigrants from mainland China flooding into Hong Kong, described using openly racist and dehumanizing language. In response, the Hong Kong government, represented by an image of the real British Governor Chris Patten, hires a character named Chin, visually based on a stolen photo of Jackie Chan and described as a relative of Bruce Lee, to massacre the entire population of mainland China, all 1.2 billion people. Meanwhile, on the other side, a secret Chinese government project is working to resurrect the real and at the time still living Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping, depicted in the game as Tung Xiaoping, as a literal undead and ultimate weapon. The actual gameplay is an extremely basic shooting game. You control Chin and moving him left and right at the bottom of the screen, shooting at waves of Chinese civilians who move down from the top. Every enemy you shoot explodes into a small mushroom cloud. Chin has no health bar at all. You take one single hit from anything, and the game is instantly over. After defeating enough enemies, you then fight the floating, severed head of Tung Xiaoping. Appears as a boss, just look at this thing, and once you beat him, the game simply restarts itself and repeats forever, since actually reaching a score of 1.2 billion, meaning the actual stated goal would realistically take decades of non-stop play. The game's most infamous element is its game over screen. It displays the words "Chin is dead" in English and broken Chinese, layered over a real photograph of a dead human corpse. For years, this photo was an unsolved urban legend. Internet communities speculated it showed either a Polish boxer or a victim of the Bosnian War. The mystery has since been solved. The image is a confirmed video frame from the Japanese Mondo film New Death File 3, depicting an actual civilian casualty from the Bosnian War. From the moment the game is turned on, players are subjected to an endless 6-second audio loop of the communist anthem, I Love Beijing Tiananmen. The song loops through the title screen, gameplay, and every game over screen without ever pausing. By complete accident, the game also turned out to be eerily predictive. It correctly guessed that Deng Xiaoping would die in 1997. However, its prediction of the 1997 Hong Kong handover was actually based on the Sino-British Joint Declaration, which had been public knowledge since 1984. Hong Kong 97 is widely considered by critics, journalists, and gaming historians alike to be one of the worst video games ever created. Not just because of broken mechanics, but because of its open racism, its use of a real corpse as a punishment screen, and its completely unfiltered political hatred wrapped inside what looks like a children's shooting game. It earned a strange kind of cult following purely because of how shockingly bad and offensive it is, to the point that a sequel, Hong Kong 2097, was eventually made decades later. The disturbing part is that an actual human being sat down and deliberately built this on purpose, and somehow, against all odds, people still managed to get their hands on it and play it. If you like this video, then you would definitely like the next part of this series. It will be shown on your screen.